This episode contains adult themes and is not appropriate for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, the world. This is They Will Kill, a true crime podcast. I am Courtney Eck.
And I'm Sadie Eck.
And we are sisters, and we talk about murder. And I'm going to keep the intro super short this time because I know you are all dying to hear how this freaking story ends. I caught my wife swearing at the podcast today when she realized that it was a two-part story. Which is adorable. No, it's such a good story. And I know you're all excited to hear how it ends. And it ends in a very fucked up way. So that's all I'll say about that. And take it away, Sadie.
All right. So last episode, we ended where Jeffrey had decided that God told him that he needed to kill members of his own house, in his own cult, basically, in his group. And so he was getting ready to sort of reveal the details of the plan.
That casual plan.
Mm-hmm. No big deal.
Yep.
You know, what are you going to do? Well, kill some people. So it was easy for Jeffrey to pick who he was going to kill. He had always detested the Avery family, and he felt that he could prove to the group that the family was, quote, wicked. They had stopped attending classes shortly after moving to Kirkland. Jeffrey said, quote, "By not attending my classes, the Averys have hardened their hearts to the word. They are not interested in learning the greater portion of the word. Instead, they have chosen to receive the lesser portion." I mean, talk about a man.
Narcissism.
Well, and away with words.
Yeah, the lesser portion.
Yeah. So this meant that the Averys had been taken captive by the devil and led by his will down to destruction.
I mean, if you don't go to a couple Bible studies, definitely
The devil
being
gotcha.
led by the devil into destruction. Absolutely.
He told his followers to thank God for the Avery family because God had provided them to be used as sacrifices. He told his followers not to tell them of his plan. At the same time, he began wooing them back to class. Because of this, they had no idea that Jeffrey's planned to kill them. By March, the talk of human sacrifice preoccupied the group whenever the Averys weren't around. They began to prepare for the upcoming event. By April, they had amassed more than 4,000 rounds of ammunition.
What?
Yeah.
To kill 5 people.
Mm-hmm. And added a 48-pound handmade 50 caliber rifle that cost nearly $3,000. He bought it. He bought it because he wanted a gun capable of shooting down a helicopter.
Did he have a specific plan to shoot down a helicopter, or
No,
that was his bar? Like, I would need a firearm that's capable of this level of
and
destruction.
he thought that this would just be the beginning. Remember that his whole plan here is to not only bring his followers to meet God, but to enter into tribulation and open the 7 seals and start Armageddon, basically. So he's preparing for end times.
Yep.
Like you do.
Yeah, that would require a gun that's capable of shooting down a helicopter.
Right. Yes. So as the day approached, Jeffrey had a new revelation that he was supposed to kill 10 people, not just 5.
Uh-oh.
He then added 5 more of his followers to his kill list. On April 10th, he had 2 of his followers dig a giant pit in the barn. He planned to get his victims into the pit and then shoot them. He would then bury their bodies.
Jesus.
The local police and FBI were still investigating Jeffrey and his followers. They were having the 2 members who left the group be informants for them. The informants were still talking to some of the other members of the group, so they were trying to gather information as much as they could.
Right.
The authorities were doing surveillance on the property. They understood that Jeffrey was a threat. They just didn't know what his plan was, and they didn't have enough evidence of a crime to arrest him.
Ugh.
They attempted to get a search warrant for the property, but were told that there was insufficient evidence to justify getting one.
God.
They decided to take a risky step and confront Jeffrey at the farm without a search warrant. 16 FBI agents and 6 Kirkland officers were going to swarm the property. They were hoping to scare Jeffrey off and thought maybe he would give them permission to search the property.
Mm-hmm.
They even admitted later that they were going way beyond their normal authority, but couldn't just sit back and do nothing.
Well, good for them. I mean, you know, I'm not a big fan of police overreach, but in a case like this, it's like, I would also have a really hard time sitting back and just hoping for the best when you know this guy's like amassing weapons and essentially becoming a terrorist group real fast. Yeah.
Right. Especially in a little town like Kirkland.
Yep.
And Jeffrey wasn't real quiet about who, you know,
being
just
a
who he
crazy
was.
person.
And,
Yeah.
So they picked April 18th for their plan. They had no idea that they'd be one day too late.
Oh, no. Oh, God.
I know. So on April 12th, Jeffrey and Alice went to the Averys for dinner. After dinner, Alice helped Cheryl pick which items the family would take with them to the wilderness to meet God.
Oh, God.
Jeffrey spent time playing with 6-year-old Karen, bouncing her on his knee while she giggled.
What a fucking asshole. God.
On April 14th, all of the group members had quit their jobs and pulled their children from school. Dennis Avery called Jeffrey to let him know that he had been issued a credit card with a $1,500 limit. Jeffrey was pleased and planned to go shopping with Dennis the next day. Jeffrey checked the scripture one more time to see if he would have to kill 10 people. He was able to find one passage that allowed him to spare the 5 members of the group that he cared about, but decided that God still wanted him to murder the Avery family.
Well, I don't know what to say about that.
I know. There's nothing to say.
No, I'm glad you're not killing 5 more, but I don't know. Stop doing that, people. Stop using religion to justify.
Get what you want.
Yeah, and justify your extreme mental illness.
Right. So after his studies, he picked up Dennis Avery and the pair bought 3 more guns. So on Monday, April 17th, 1989, Jeffrey announced that it was D-Day. One member went to a motel in Kirkland and made a reservation for the Averys. They wanted it to look like the family was leaving town.
Mm-hmm.
He also went and bought a stun gun. They picked up the Averys at 11:30 in the morning and brought them to the farm for lunch, and then took them to the motel so there would be witnesses who saw the family there.
When you hear about things like this, especially with this many people involved, it's trying to imagine what that day is like leading up to something horrible like that. It's so scary. Like, that's just so scary, that part of it to me.
Well, I think there's one thing when you think about it, when it's or even planning, like getting the equipment, but yeah, when you know it's actually getting ready to happen, and you follow through, and this whole group of people follow through. Yeah.
Like, I can understand getting each other all riled up, like when you're a teenager and you're like, oh, we're gonna go get that other team at the base of the football game or what, you know, and you're like, yeah, they've got it coming. That mob mentality, I can understand that. I can understand believing this guy and sort of getting up to that point, but then the following through with it, and then like finding yourself in that day taking steps toward the mass murder of a family, like that scares the absolute shit out of me.
Yeah. Yes. So around dinner time, Jeffrey got one of his .45 caliber pistols and 27 bullets. He loaded the gun. A few minutes after 6 p.m., the Averys arrived for dinner. As soon as Karen, who was wearing a shirt with rainbows and ponies on it, came into the room, she ran toward Alice and gave her a big hug. Remember, Karen's 6. She told Alice that she drew a picture for her but had forgotten it at the motel. Alice reassured her they would go get it another time.
So sickening.
The entire group ate dinner together. One member got so upset knowing that the Avery family was getting ready to die that she had to leave the table to collect herself. While eating dinner, Dennis Avery noticed that Karen hadn't tried everything on her plate. He told her to try some corn. She told her dad that she didn't want any. Jeffrey took this exchange as a sign from God. Quote, she was a rebellious and wicked child.
Oh my God.
The Averys were completely unaware of what was about to happen to them. They were described as being just like sacrificial lambs.
Yeah.
So after dinner, Alice left with her 3 youngest children on a made-up errand. They didn't want her kids to be there during the murder. Meanwhile, Jeffrey told Cheryl Avery to write a letter to her mother so she wouldn't worry when they left for the wilderness. He told her what to write. Quote, Dear Mom and Dad, just a hurried note to let you know that things have happened very fast and Dennis accepted work in Wyoming and we needed to get there fast. We will let you know address and details when we are settled. Thanks. Love, Cheryl. Once that was done, Jeffrey got up from the table and went to his room. All of the men, except for Dennis, followed him. Jeffrey shut the door. He picked up his .45 pistol that was loaded and said, quote, "Are you in or are you out?" One by one, they nodded. The group included Jeffrey's 18-year-old son, Damon.
God.
The 6 men left the house and went to the barn. Jeffrey sent one of the men, who was named Ron, back to get Dennis and to tell him to join them in the barn to pick out which possessions he wanted to bring with him to the wilderness. As they entered the barn, Ron tried 3 times to use the stun gun on Dennis, but it did nothing but zap. It caused him pain, but didn't take him down as planned.
God.
Dennis cried out and said, "What are you doing? God damn it, this isn't necessary." The men knocked him to the ground and taped his hands, feet, and mouth with duct tape. They didn't put tape over his eyes because he was supposed to see his executioner. They carried him through the barn and put him down in the muddy pit they had dug earlier. Dennis was on his knees, looking up at Jeffrey, who was standing above him holding his gun. Quote, "I looked him in the eyes," Jeffrey later said, "because I wanted him to know who was sending him before God for his wickedness." He said the scriptures required him to look Dennis face to face and then pierce his heart. According to Jeffrey, he then shot Dennis twice in the chest, but the autopsy later shows that Dennis was actually shot in the back, and so they think all of that, looking him in the eyes, was a bunch of bullshit.
Oh, really?
That Jeffrey probably just came behind him and shot him in the back.
Oh, my God. I mean, to all of this. Oh, my God, to all of this. But
I know.
what a fucking coward. Also, like, protecting your little family. Not that I want to subject his children to this, but, like, to protect your family while you destroy another family. It's just... I
know. I mean, there's just so much in this that is unbelievable and tragic.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
selfish, and
It's horrifying.
Yeah. He then, after shooting Dennis, he then calls the men over to come look at the body. Jeffrey's son Damon later called Dennis laying on the ground, his chest covered in blood. Damon started crying. He was in shock that his father had actually killed someone. He was so upset that they sent him to the loft of the barn to be a lookout.
A poor kid.
I know. Next, they brought Cheryl into the barn. The men surrounded her, and one told her to be calm and surrender. Confused and frightened, Cheryl stood perfectly still while they taped her hands, feet, and mouth and eyes. But Jeffrey didn't want her to see him. They put her down into the pit where Jeffrey shot her almost immediately. She was shot twice in the right breast and once in the abdomen. The coroner would later estimate that Cheryl didn't die instantly. It's likely it took her many minutes before succumbing to her wounds.
Oh, no.
Next was 15-year-old Trina. She was told her mother needed her help in the barn. Once inside, they swarmed her, and one of the men told her to relax. They were going to play a game. It would be fun.
Oh, my God.
They taped her up like her mother, but this time they put the duct tape all around her entire head. One man said, quote, "It's just like the 3 monkeys. See no evil, hear no evil, say no evil."
No. Oh, that's so scary to me.
After they put her in the pit, Jeffrey decided to shoot her in the head, but she turned just as he pulled the trigger. She yelled, "Ouch!" and Jeffrey quickly shot her twice in the back. They lured the 2 younger girls in the barn by offering to let them see the horses, but it had to be one at a time. Becky, who was 12, went first. When she got to the barn, she was immediately suspicious. And if you remember, Becky was sort of the go-getter. She was a tomboy. She was stubborn and seemed really smart, sort of quick-witted.
Yep.
So she was immediately suspicious. They quickly taped her up and put her in the pit before she could fight. Jeffrey shot her once, but she was still breathing, so he shot her again. It just gets me. It's so sad.
It's so sad. It's so scary and so sad.
This next part's real fucked.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, you should be very calm, and it should be totally fine with people murdering 6-year-olds in a pit with their family. I don't know what's wrong with you.
When Ron, who had 2 children himself, aged 6 and 4, went to get Karen, she ran to him eagerly. He scooped her up, and then he gave her a piggyback ride to the barn.
There's a special place in hell for somebody who gives a little girl a piggyback ride to her death, you know?
Yeah, after just witnessing her whole family be murdered.
Yep.
She didn't resist when the men wrapped her up with tape, but she was very frightened when they covered her eyes and mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Ron was the one to carry her to the pit and place her inside with the rest of her family. Jeffrey didn't want to miss, so he shot her twice in the head at point-blank range.
Jesus.
Forensics would later show that Jeffrey shot each victim with a different round of ammunition. He was experimenting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was unloading his gun, putting different ammunition in to see what it would do to his victims.
So gross. That's so gross.
So after the murders were over, they covered the bodies with lime and then with rocks, and then they filled the pit with dirt. After that was done, they filled the room full of garbage. Jeffrey, Alice, who had returned by then, and Damon went to the Red Roof Inn and collected all of Avery's possessions. While there, Alice found the picture that Karen had made for her earlier that day. It was a picture of a rainbow and said to Alice, "I love you, Karen."
I don't know.
Once they got back to the farmhouse, Jeffrey had all of his followers gather in the living room for scripture class. He opened the Book of Mormon and began to read, quote, "Behold, the Lord slayeth the wicked to bring forth his righteous purpose." Jeffrey told the women to comfort their men that night. "This is only the beginning," he reminded them. "The scriptures say that we will have to kill many, many more." For several minutes after this, it was completely quiet except for the sound of crying.
Yep.
The next morning, as the commune was getting prepared for their wilderness trek, law enforcement showed up as planned.
Forgot about that. We're going to miss it by a day.
I know.
Oh, my God. Just imagine being the law enforcement agents that were like, oh, if we had just scheduled it for Monday, everyone would be alive.
I can't imagine. No, especially when they think they're doing the very best they can and being proactive.
They really were. Yeah.
Overreaching to try to stop.
Yep.
Yeah. And they missed it by a day.
Or like 12 hours or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Yep. So they separated the group and started questioning them individually. At first, they thought the police had somehow found out about the murders, and they were shitting themselves, is what I said. But after the agents...
Got to keep up with the poo-poo theme for this.
Well, if I don't laugh about something right now, I'm just going to
That's exactly why I made that
puke
stupid joke.
Yeah. But after the agents started asking them questions, the group quickly realized that they had no idea that they had killed the Avery family just hours before.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey's son Damon told agents, quote, "Yes, we have firearms. We are not violent people. We kill our rabbits when they are sick, but wrestling in the backyard is the most violent thing we've ever done."
Inaccurate. Nope.
Mm-hmm. Realizing they weren't getting anywhere with Jeffrey's group, they left. Yarborough told the FBI agent, quote, "We didn't do what we were attempting to do out there today. We wanted to break them up and put the fear of law enforcement in them. I'm afraid we actually tightened the cohesiveness of the group."
Uh-huh.
If anything, the agents worried that they had caused Jeffrey to feel invincible.
Yep.
Back at the farmhouse, the group got their belongings together and prepared to leave. Jeffrey wasn't sure exactly where they were going to go. The scriptures told him to head south. Including children, there were a total of 24 people who joined Jeffrey to go into the wilderness.
Wow. Yeah. Again, so let's just remind everybody from the first part of this episode that this is the worst, most boring, shittiest, least sexy cult ever. Mm-hmm. And now you have actually killed 5 innocent people. And you're like, staying in this cult, following this guy to Zion.
Yep.
Ugh.
So after 2 days of travel, they arrived in the Canaan Valley of West Virginia. Jeffrey saw a motel called the Highlander, and the movie was a huge inspiration to him.
Of course it was. What a nerd.
I know. And in the book, they talk a lot about how much he loved the Highlander. I did not want to get into it. So,
God.
Yeah. So he declared this is where God wanted them to be. They found some public land that was isolated and available to the public to use for free. It was perfect for Jeffrey. They set up camp, which included a generator for their freezer, a microwave, and a TV VCR.
Really? In camp? They were camping with that?
Yeah, they had a
Right.
generator. Yep. I know, it sounds pretty cush in some ways.
Yeah, it's exactly how I camp. I love camping, but it it has to
Air
perfectly
mattress,
resemble my house.
Air
Yeah.
conditioner.
One time we went actual camping, like where you hike in like 4 miles, and I brought a like 30-pound air mattress.
On May 3rd, Jeffrey's birthday, he went up to the top of a nearby mountain to meet God and to be, quote, endowed with a power. When he returned, he told the group that Jesus Christ came down to him on a beam of light and told him he was pleased with the blood atonement of the Averys.
What a cornball. Like, you can't even come up with something better than Jesus coming down on a beam of light.
Mm-hmm.
This guy and his way with words.
Right. So according to Jeffrey, Christ gave him a new title, quote, God of the whole earth.
Once again.
I know.
There's the universe. You could choose the galaxy, the universe, the whole
Anything.
earth.
Yeah. The whole
God,
earth.
Jesus could have come riding in on a jaguar, a cheetah, like a fucking lightning bolt. It's a beam of light.
Not creative.
Nope.
I know. I mean, it would be like, if anything about having a podcast has taught me that it's hard to come up with words on the fly, like reactions. So if I was a cult leader, I would just be like, oh, yeah, interesting.
You're just looking around the room, like the residue of the. Just like looks at a picture of Jesus coming down on a beam of light because that's all Jesus ever is pictured as. So
Right.
I'm rolling my eyes real hard at this guy.
Yeah. So he also claimed that Christ had made immortal and divine. He said, quote, I am the law, there is no other law.
Okay.
Yeah. Jeffrey had complete control over his group. He decided he wanted another wife and took a woman from the group named Tanya from her husband. When Alice found out, she was furious. Jeffrey told her that God had ordered him to, quote, pierce Tanya. He could do it with his penis by taking her as his wife and having sex with her, or he could shoot her with a gun.
Ugh, I just like shook, like tremored with a chill of disgust from hearing that.
Yeah. It was up to Alice to decide. What Alice didn't know was that he had been sleeping with her already for 2 months.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Nope. So Alice spared Tanya's life and agreed to share Jeffrey with her. That night at scripture class, Jeffrey loaded his gun, told the group his plan to take her as his second wife, and then pointed the gun at Tanya's husband, who's also named Dennis. Jeffrey asked Dennis if he had any problems with God's arrangement. Dennis answered, no, sir. He had no doubt that Jeffrey would be happy to kill him then and there if he protested.
Yeah, that's been well established.
Yeah. As quickly as he took Tanya in, he cast her aside. Suddenly, he was telling the group that he could not sleep with her because she was unattractive and full of sin. She was no longer his second wife. He was ready for someone new.
Jesus.
Yeah. He told Alice one night that he had a dream where... I'm sorry. I forgot where this was going. He told Alice one night that he had a dream where God showed him a vagina.
Oh my God.
And then ordered him to find that vagina.
I mean, once again, look, and that's kind of smart in a way, because it's not, this woman is going to have this hair or eye color or whatever. Like, I have to find the vagina, and there's only one way to find a vagina. It's like, that's how I'll know that I found it, was by searching for all, like, sampling all of them.
Mm-hmm. So after being in the wilderness for 4 months, the group was getting restless and depressed. No matter what, Jeffrey told them that they were too full of sin to go before God. He said that the women were the problem and that they had to literally be, quote, stripped of their pride.
Oh, no.
They would each have to perform a striptease for Jeffrey. He would then, quote, shed his blood for their sins as Christ did by ejaculating into the women's panties while they danced. In Jeffrey's mind, blood and semen were the same thing. After this, their sins would be wiped clean. If he could not ejaculate during the dance, then the woman's sins could not be cleansed, and she and her family would have to be destroyed.
God.
Yeah. He based this in different scriptures, and the group was fine with the plan.
I'm speechless.
I know. I mean, as long as he backed up what he said with scripture, the group went for it. He was able to justify it enough.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
It's crazy. But at the same time, if you think about the idea of religion in a broader sense, like that's exactly what it is. You got this incredibly complicated texts, ancient, miraculous texts that are wide open to interpretation. And that's exactly what people do.
Yep. So it was during the striptease that he found the vagina that he'd been looking for.
I'm so sorry to laugh at sexual assault because it's so not funny.
No,
it's
I
fucking
know.
awful. It's so humiliating and horrifying. But I don't know, man, this guy.
Well, and for me, it's like things that I never thought that I would ever say out loud into a microphone and then like cast it wide for everyone to hear. Like that's what, yeah.
Yep.
So So it belonged to a woman named Kathy, and she would become his next obsession.
It belonged to a woman named Kathy. Just remind you that she's referring to the vagina.
So after the dances were done, things at camp got real strange real fast.
That's when they got strange.
That's a good point.
Oh, God. I'm going to choke.
So Jeffrey was beginning to make bolder and bolder statements about his divinity and powers. He was completely fixated on sex. He started to target both men and women, hoping they would agree to sleep with him. The law enforcement in Kirkland had noticed the group had fled the farmhouse. After tracking down the U-Haul they rented, they knew Jeffrey and his clan had traveled to West Virginia. They sent memos to all the local law enforcement and park rangers to keep an eye out for the group. The sheriff spotted the group while out checking for turkey hunters. He decided to fly over the camp to check it out before approaching them on foot to see how they would react. When the helicopter flew over, it sent Jeffrey's group into a panic. They were sure the police were coming to get them for the Avery murders. He's really lucky that helicopter didn't get shot down.
I was just going to say that little did they know he had a helicopter gun, but
yeah,
apparently they weren't that reactive.
Right. Doesn't sound like they had it like out in the open setup, because that probably would be pretty suspicious, but illegal.
I know, what does that even look like, a helicopter gun?
Yeah, you can. I had to take a little like gun history lesson to know about this better.
Yep.
But you picture like a war Jeep with those great big guns on the back with a turret. Can you picture it? Yeah, that's what it is.
Holy shit! Wow.
Yeah.
I was picturing like one of those war guns with the little tripod legs, like the do pod. I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, it's sort of like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but bigger.
We're good at war and weaponry.
Yep. So Jeffrey ordered Alice to leave with their 3 youngest kids and go back to her mom's in Missouri. So Alice agreed and then realized Jeffrey just wanted her out of the way so that he could start sleeping with Kathy and take her as a new second wife.
I mean, I feel like he would just do that. He's not trying to...
Yeah, and he was. She just didn't know it. She was kind of like catching on, and she had... Part of the striptease was that she had to be in the room while it happened.
Oh, God.
And they talked a lot about, in the book, about how because he had told her about the dream of finding the vagina.
Yep.
That when Kathy was dancing, he was like, oh, there it is. And Alice was like, fuck. Okay. This is where this is headed now.
She was like, I shouldn't have given him my copy of The Handmaid's Tale.
So by October, life in West Virginia was miserable. It was bitterly cold, and they didn't have any food. They would eat rice and cream gravy 3 meals a day. He had the men go into town to find work. He promised they would move as soon as they had money for a rental truck. But when they would bring money home, Jeffrey would then take Kathy into town and treat her to dinner.
Oh, no.
He also would use the generator and heat their tent, but nobody else had heat.
Of course.
The group was desperate to leave. They finally found someone who would come pick them up in their semi-truck and bring them back to Missouri. Part of it, too, was that Jeffrey, he couldn't ever be away from Alice for very long, and so he spent a lot of time going into Missouri to see her, and he would try to, like, teach classes and stuff, but nobody would give them money for those. He was just, like, you know, going crazy, and people knew it, so they weren't willing to donate money to him like they had before.
Right.
And so it was during one of these trips where it was Kathy actually who decided she needed to get everybody out and found somebody that would come and get them. So once back in Independence, they found another friend who let the group stay in his old barn on a dairy farm. So we're not in Ohio anymore, just to make sure people are clear. We're not at the temple. We're back in Independence where Jeffrey started.
Right.
They were still miserable and the group was starting to fall apart. Alice was so upset by Jeffrey's infidelity that she eventually left him and moved in with her parents permanently.
Oh, wow.
Well,
I'm
I
surprised
shouldn't
that
say permanently.
she was... Well,
I'm just...
Right. I'm just surprised she was the first to break ranks, you know? It's like...
Well, and Jeffrey was fine with it at this point. He was super into Kathy.
Right.
So 2 of the men of the group left shortly after. They had tried to sneak away, but they were caught. Jeffrey decided to let them go without a fight. A few days later, one of the women left as well. She had walked 4 miles to a payphone and called a friend to come get her.
Good. Get out of there.
I know, and I'm surprised that he let people go so easily. You know, clearly things were falling apart and they were out of money. And
Right.
But you think that for him to control his group who just witnessed a mass murder, you think he would try a little harder to keep them together. But
totally. Well, I've noticed like there's a woman in my town who's nuts, and nuts. High functioning, like narcissistic, sociopathic kind of nuts, not just like underwear on the outside, you know, the fun nuts. And she just burns through relationships. And I'm always amazed that she can continue to show her face in public, but it's like that narcissism just drives her to know that there will always be another Mark, you know, like there's always going to be another victim. So I'm sure that was part of his thing, was like, all right, you go ahead and leave. I'll find somebody to replace you, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I think like 6 or 7 months had passed. And so I think he was feeling pretty confident that he was going to get away with the murder.
Yeah, for sure. If they followed him into that depth of misery and nobody had caught him or turned him in, then yeah.
Yep. So Jeffrey decided it was time for him to get away from the group as well. He told them to all find jobs and houses for the winter. He wanted them to continue to send him money, and they would all come back together in the spring. Mm-hmm. His plan was to take his family and one other member of the group, his name was Danny, to California.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. They left for San Diego that same weekend. After he left, the group realized that they had been scammed. They got together to figure out what they should do. The talk quickly turned to the Averys. They decided they should go to the police, but first they wanted to spend a little time with their families.
Ugh.
Meanwhile, back in Kirkland, even though 7 months had passed since the group had left, the police chief, Yarborough, just couldn't let Jeffrey go. He started to call around. He learned that they had left West Virginia. The sheriff told him that they found some of their belongings at camp, including a Bible with one of the members' names in it. Yarborough was worried that something had happened to that person. He thought the Bible was probably too important to be left behind on purpose, and decided that he wanted to try and locate all the members to be sure that they were still alive. He called his old informant, Kevin, who had fled first and had been the one to alert him of Jeffrey in the first place. Mm-hmm. During their talk, Yarborough read Kevin a list of names of people who went with Jeffrey to the wilderness. Dennis and Cheryl Avery were on the list. Kevin stopped him and said that he seriously doubted that the Avery family went with the group to the wilderness. Mm-hmm. He explained that Jeffrey hated that family and would never bring them to meet God.
Right.
So after looking into it more, he realized that no one had interviewed the Averys when the FBI questioned the group, and that no one had seen them since then either.
God bless Yarborough, man. I love a good cop. I love a good persistent detective or police officer.
Mm-hmm. Who really clearly trusts his instincts. You know.
Yeah, and has good instincts. And yeah.
So Dennis's brother Tim was also wondering where the family was. He had recently married and he had sent his brother an invitation. When they didn't show up at the wedding or even send a card, they started to worry.
Yep.
On December 31st, 1989, Chief Yarborough got a call from an agent who worked for the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms with quite a story to tell him. The agent had just spent more than 2 hours interviewing a man who claimed that 5 murder victims were buried in a barn outside of Kirkland.
Mm-hmm.
A member of the group, whose name was Keith, he was the one legally married to Kathy. You know, Kathy, the new second wife. So yeah, Keith, who was legally married to Kathy, had gone against the group and decided to talk to authorities.
Good.
He was hoping that he could get Kathy, who is now in California and pregnant with Jeffrey's baby.
Oh no.
To come home and be with him again. Yeah, they had 4 boys of their own.
Ugh.
And it's just like on and on.
Yeah, guess what, dude? It's a nice plan, but you're going to jail.
Mm-hmm. So when Yarborough heard that it was supposedly the Avery family that had been murdered, he said he felt sick. He contacted family members and learned that no one had heard from the Averys since April. At around 10:30 p.m. that night, he went to the barn with the FBI agent who had originally helped him with the temple takeover.
Mm-hmm.
They got permission from the homeowner to search the property. No one had rented the farm since Jeffrey's group had fled, so the property was empty and electricity had been shut off from the barn. You know what I don't want to do ever is go at 10:30 at night and look at a murder barn in the dark.
Nope. Yeah, wait till morning. I mean, or get a generator.
Right. When they opened the barn doors, they saw the large mound of trash that the group had left behind. When they approached the room where the Averys were buried, Yarborough, who was desperately hoping that this was all a hoax, said his heart sank. Mm-hmm. There was so much garbage packed into that small space, he knew that someone was trying to hide something.
Yep.
It was too dark to start clearing out the room, so they decided to wait until morning. On the way out, the FBI agent shone his flashlight on a box and spotted a formal-looking document. It was Cheryl Avery's 1965 high school diploma.
Oh, no.
So on January 3rd, after more than 8 hours of clearing garbage out of the room, they could clearly see where the Averys had been buried. They started to dig, and as soon as they overturned the first shovel of dirt, a stench rose from the ground.
Ugh.
After a full day of careful digging, law enforcement found all 5 badly decomposed bodies of the Avery family.
Yep.
Dennis, Cheryl, Trina, Becky, and Karen had finally been found. At a news conference that night, prosecutor Stephen LaTourette, who had a daughter the same age as 6-year-old Karen, became very emotional and said, quote, "These people are the cruelest, most inhumane people this country has ever seen.
Yep.
They are going to die in the electric chair for these crimes."
Yep.
The FBI quickly located the Lundgren family in San Diego and arrested them. As soon as Alice was in custody, she started talking, putting full blame on Jeffrey.
Oh, Alice.
Other members of the group started to go to the police, hoping if they came forward voluntarily, they would get immunity or a lesser sentence.
Yep.
Soon enough, all members of the group were under arrest.
Good. Get them.
Yeah. Prosecutor LaTourette said later, quote, "What always bothered me about those that eventually confessed was their total lack of emotion. They would become real teary-eyed and boo-hoo when they talked about how Jeff had pimped them and led them down this path, but there was no show of emotion when they talked about killing these little kids."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I feel sorry for them and have empathy for them, and I also fucking hate them. And
I really don't. I think that you can only use, like, sure, you're brainwashed. I just don't feel sorry for them. They had plenty of time to step back and think about their actions, and their need to meet God was so powerful that they were able to think that their God would actually want this to happen. I mean, it's just like, I don't know.
well, it's like,
Sure, you can believe that, but I'm not going to feel sorry for you later.
yeah.
For doing what you did.
Yeah. It's also what's wrong with the country in general. This like
Right.
inability to think for oneself. Where like dig a little deeper, ask a couple questions, you know, just like blindly following a full-blown sociopath into the wilderness, which is a metaphor for our country, if you did pick up on that.
Right.
You know, grow a fucking backbone, question your psychotic husband. Yeah, I don't need to go into rampage.
I
But
know.
but yeah,
I know.
yeah, it is. You are correct. They are horrible people.
Right. Yep. And if you decide that it's okay to go through with this, then you get caught, you're going to pay for it. So indictments were quickly handed down to Jeffrey, his son Damon, and 4 other members in the group for aggravated murder, which is punishable by death in Ohio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So 7 others, including Alice, were charged with complicity to commit aggravated murder. Mm. This charge carried a penalty up to life in prison. Mm-hmm. The prosecutor granted Keith, who was the one that came forward first, immunity. He also decided to give 6 other members plea deals in exchange for their testimony against Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah. 7 of the members would go to trial. This included Jeffrey, Alice, and their son Damon.
I do feel sorry for Damon, I gotta say.
Yeah, for sure. I do too.
Yeah.
He's the sort of an outlier for me.
Yeah.
So Jeffrey's defense attorneys quickly realized he would absolutely be found guilty.
Yeah.
They were going to spend all their efforts trying to keep him from death row. Mm-hmm. They looked into his past for mitigating circumstances that might sway the jury to give him life in prison. Mm-hmm. 2 psychologists evaluated him. They found he suffered from a severe personality disorder, but he was not insane.
Yep.
Each member was put on trial separately. Alice ended up going first. Her defense was obvious. Her attorneys portrayed her as an abused wife, too afraid of her husband to keep Jeffrey from murdering the Averys or turning him into the police.
Right, of course.
In their opinion, she was just another victim. Alice took the stand in her own defense and said that she didn't really think Jeffrey would go through with the murders. She thought he was just testing his followers' loyalty. Mm-hmm. She stated that she was completely unaware of the murders and left the farm that night to legitimately run errands.
I mean, it's a good defense.
And I don't know if I already said this, but her errand that she had to go run at like 8 o'clock that night was to go buy picnic tables. By the way. So there's that. Picnic tables, I guess, that they're going to bring to the wilderness. I don't know, but that's what she had to go rush off to do.
Right. You know, she's got a busy life.
Right.
Witnessing all those strip teases and like Rambo, your steady stream of Rambo movies you got to consume. Where do I find time to buy picnic tables?
The prosecution showed how Alice was the, quote, mother of the group. She was Jeffrey's personal spy, and she constantly pushed the idea that Jeffrey was a prophet.
Yep.
Witness testimony said that even though she was gone during the murder, she knew exactly what was happening and even called to ask if, quote, the company was gone before coming home that night.
Right. Of course.
They explained that Alice could have easily changed Jeffrey's mind and saved the Avery family, but chose not to. Mm-hmm. After deliberating for 2 days, on August 1st, the jury found Alice guilty on all 15 charges filed against her.
Good.
Including conspiracy to commit murder and 5 counts of kidnapping.
Good.
She was sentenced to the maximum allowed, a total of 150 years.
Wow.
She will die in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. The jury later said that Alice's taped statement to agents shortly after her arrest was what condemned her. Quote, "Did you know why the Averys were coming to the farm that night?" the agent asked. Alice replied, "I suspected that it was the sacrifice." Mm-hmm. "Had he talked to you about that?" She said, "No, yes and no. It was like not directly, but indirectly. You had to be stupid not to know what he was up to." Mm-hmm. So on August 23rd, Jeffrey went to trial. His defense delivered a flat 3-minute opening statement.
Wow.
He said, quote, "Jeffrey Lundgren did shoot and kill Dennis, Trina, Rebecca, and Karen. They were not going to dispute that." That was his opening statement.
Yeah. He did it.
Mm-hmm. Good. They wanted to hurry through the first stage of the trial. They wanted to minimize the jury's time spent focused on the Averys and their murder, hoping that they might feel more sympathetic to Jeffrey if they didn't fully understand the brutality of the crime committed against them.
Yeah.
For the most part, Jeffrey ignored the proceedings and spent the time reading from the Bible or Book of Mormon.
Oh my God.
The only time he paid attention was when the jury was shown the autopsy photos of the dead bodies. Prosecutor La Tourette said later, quote, "When he studied those photos, I got really pissed. I hated him more and more because it was clear that he was admiring his handiwork."
Yeah, I'm shaking my head so hard. Like, what a fucking megalomaniac piece of shit.
The defense called no witnesses during the trial. The prosecution showed that Jeffrey was a con man who tricked his followers into supporting him in all ways. He stole their money and he killed the Averys to keep his group completely under his control.
Yep.
After only a 4-day trial, the jury quickly found Jeffrey guilty on all counts. They then moved on to the mitigation phase of the trial. The defense hoped to explain why Jeffrey had murdered an innocent family. They went into his childhood, young adulthood, and his religious beliefs. An expert testified that the Mormon religion was much more vulnerable to self-proclaimed prophets. At least 12 other people had pulled away from the RLDS just as Jeffrey had.
Yeah.
So 12 other people have pulled away and said that they're prophets.
I believe that. I definitely believe that.
Yeah. Jeffrey's defense attorney said, quote, "We knew from the start that Jeffrey was not beaten as a child. There was no evidence that he had been raped or abused. There wasn't really anything you could hang your hat on where you could say, aha, this is why Jeffrey turned out this way. Mm-hmm. But we felt there was enough there in his past and in his religion to make jurors see that there are degrees of illness, and Jeffrey was way off the scale when it comes to mental disorders."
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So in Ohio, a defendant facing the death penalty is allowed to make a final plea to jurors before being sentenced. Jeffrey decided he wanted to teach a scripture class.
Oh, no.
Yeah, his lawyers begged him to not do this and to keep it really brief.
No.
Yep. Jeffrey started by saying, quote, "I am a prophet of God. I am even more than that, much, much more."
I'm the president of the world, of the whole world.
Yep.
I'm the governor of...
He then went on for 5 hours. 5.
Okay. You almost are making me like him now. Like, he's so... It's like when you're watching a movie and it's so bad that by the end you're like, you know what? I kind of enjoyed that. Like,
yeah,
the fact that he was... that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, so he went on for 5 hours. He never apologized for killing the Averys.
No, of course he didn't.
It took the jury less than 2 hours before recommending that Jeffrey be put to death.
Yeah, I'm also not surprised to hear that.
No. Police Chief Yarborough said, quote, "I feel good because I think we were able to show that Jeffrey is not a prophet. He is a fat coward who is terrified unless he can hide behind his religious books. He is a baby killer."
Perfectly said.
Yep.
Jeffrey could learn a thing or two from that guy. His way with
I know.
words.
I know. Yep. So on September 21st, 1990, Jeffrey was officially sentenced to death. The judge chose April 17th, 1991 as the execution date. This was the day that Jeffrey had murdered the Averys.
I like it.
Yep. Jeffrey decided that this was all God's plan.
Yeah, of course he did.
So Damon was offered a plea deal but rejected the offer. He was found guilty at trial and was sentenced to life in prison. All other followers except for Ron Luff, Ron was the one that piggybacked Karen to the barn, accepted plea deals for lesser sentences. Their sentences ranged from 1 year probation. Some of them did end up getting life in prison, but their plea deal was to keep them from
getting
the death.
murdered, right?
So Ron went to trial and was found guilty of aggravated murder and kidnapping. The jury decided to spare his life and sentenced him to 170 years in prison. On October 24th, 2006, Jeffrey napped much of the morning. He was served his last meal of turkey, potatoes and gravy, a salad, and pumpkin pie. Jeffrey claimed that God would save him from death. He could not be killed. He showed no sign of fear when he was given the first series of shots to stop his heart. At 10:26 a.m., God did not save Jeffrey Lundgren, and he was pronounced dead.
What if he had? That's how the story ended. Yeah. You guys, I don't know how none of us have heard of this, but he actually got saved by God. He came down on a beam of light. Yep.
Then
Good.
we'd all be in big, big, big trouble.
Oh, no. God. Good riddance.
Right. And that's really all I have for this crazy story.
That's plenty.
Yeah, I know.
More than enough.
I have been thinking about the Avery family a lot, obviously, while writing this, and was trying to figure out how to wrap it up for them.
Yep.
But it's in so many cases when you're researching murder, to find details on the victims is not easy.
Yep.
But I think about how the one thing that seems really true about them is that I'm going to cry again, that they really loved each other.
Yep.
And they loved their God, and they really thought that they were on the right path.
Yep.
And in some ways, I think it is a mercy for them to have all died together.
I agree.
Because that's really all they ever had was each other.
Yep. I totally agree.
So,
yeah,
you guys.
Yeah, I looked them up this morning, and they're so cute.
Yeah,
I'll
post pictures, obviously.
Oh my God.
With this episode.
They're almost like drawn. They're so cute. You know what I mean? Like they look just so happy and goofy, and I don't know. I love them.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I'm so selfish that I want Comet to take us all out at the same time, because I'm not afraid of my own death, but I'm deeply afraid of the death of the people that I love, the deaths of the people that I love. So yeah, I think it's sort of merciful. Like they were happy until they were gone. You know, they had a few minutes of fear, and that was it.
I think too, just as maybe we should have put the disclaimer at the front, but when telling the story, I also just want to make it clear that we understand that this isn't the Mormon religion, that what Jeffrey did isn't.
Yeah.
You know, I think that Mormons are some of the kindest, most generous in many ways. You know, they're the ones that are going to come and help you. And we see it over and over in the story, that they're willing to, like, okay, let's combine everything and let me give you money and let me help you. And they're very charitable. So I don't know if we made that real clear, that he was an offshoot. This wasn't, you know, by no means was anybody in the RLDS church thrilled with what he was saying.
Well, it's just like
doing.
Any religion, you know, like I have a lot of friends who grew up in the Mormon religion and had deeply traumatizing experiences with it. So, you know, but it's the same with the Christian religion. Like I'm mildly traumatized by some of the things that we went through as children in the Christian religion, you know, and it's like church to church, and even within that church, person to person, man, just depending on who you come across and how they interpret, you know, these beautiful texts and these well-intentioned religions, it just can go real, real bad. So yeah, I agree. Yeah. I lived in places with Mormon populations, and they were lovely, lovely people, but it's also kind of fucked up.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm not saying.
No, I agree with you. I don't think that the Mormon religion in general is bad, but I could say that about every religion.
Right. You know, last summer I was at my 95-year-old grandma's house, and two of what do they call them when they're on their missions?
Are those Johos?
No, are they brothers?
No, those are Mormons.
They're Mormons. Yeah, they go on their 2-year mission. After,
I think they're brothers. Anyway,
they were walking down the alley where my grandma lived, and I was mowing or something, and they were like, "Can we help you?" And they like took off their jackets, and they got down and started pulling weeds, and
yeah, I got some to help me move once.
No, they were happy to do it, and I was like, "Okay, I think that's it," and they were like, "All right, have a good day." That's great.
Yeah, man. Any religion that, like, I always say, there's nothing better than a good Christian, like an actually good Christian, not like good as in like I'm really good at being a Christian, like I do it really hard. You know what I mean?
Yes, but like whether their heart is in the right place. Yeah.
Yes, when they actually follow the teachings of Christ as they were laid out by Jesus coming down on a beam of light. Yeah, man, that shit is awesome. Love, helpfulness, charity. These are good things. Unfortunately, they don't.
Lost.
They get lost because you can't control other people with goodness, charity, you know, you control them with fear, abuse,
greed,
fire and brimstone. Yeah. So
anyway, I think I'm done talking about Jeffrey and Mormons, and I'm done. I'm good.
I think that's plenty. I am going to go. This whole thing started because I was half watching it was like Oxygen Channel or ID Channel or something, did an episode on this guy, and I was only half watching it, and I think I'm going to go back and watch it because I can't get enough of this fuckhead.
Yeah, it really is crazy.
Yeah.
Courtney recommended the story, and I kind of briefly looked into it, and I was like, I don't know. And then I started reading more, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is really, this is worth talking about.
Yep. It's got everything. I do realize though that I wish we could like pivot the podcast just to be about like kooky people, because I love talking about the kooky stuff, but then you're like, oh god, here comes the murder, and it sucks. It's really sad, and it's not.
We really do need to start like doing many episodes where we talk about criminals who just fuck up and don't actually commit crimes.
Yes, we're gonna call it Clobber Pod.
Clobber Pod.
That was one of the names.
We need to start doing that.
Yeah, let's totally do Clobber Pod. It's just like, oh, crazy thing happened. Like, I almost got away with it, or whatever that show is. Yeah, just to cleanse the palate a little bit, because it's fun to talk about human behavior up to the point of murder, but the murder part, it's not so good.
It's so sad.
So sad.
So I wanted to let everybody know that I got my extra pair of soft pants. They still exist out there. Don't worry. I know that you were probably really losing sleep. I'm very comfortable.
Yeah. Meanwhile, half of America just like at home with their family eating ham right now, like came from across the state lines. Social distancing is totally out the window.
I know.
And Sadie's like, still battening down the hatches, waiting for her soft pants to come.
Speaking of eating ham, I was sitting around this morning. We released part 1. It's Easter Sunday right now for us.
Yep.
And I was noticing that our downloads weren't happening as quickly as normal.
Yep.
And I was like, that's weird. And I was like, oh, it's Easter Sunday. Like, I don't even know what time it is most of the days. I'm so confused right now. And then I was like, we released it. I can't believe that we released an episode about this crazy
mass murdering
cult, like, who thinks he's actually Jesus Christ.
Scatological, like. And we also announced
on
Easter. We also announced that our 666th follower on Instagram. And as of right now, guys, we have 669. Happy Easter, everybody!
Happy Easter! I know.
And
luckily, I was on the phone with our mother, who is an actually really good Christian woman.
She's the best.
And I was like, Mom, listen to this. And she's like, you guys are so awful. And then like scream laughed at me because she thought it was so funny. So, thanks, Mom, for having a good sense of humor. She does listen to the show.
Sorry to our Christian followers. It's all in good humor. We're not.
I didn't realize. I really just didn't even think about it. Had I think I probably would have said, let's skip Easter.
No way. No way. Nope. I definitely would have pushed
the Easter release.
Old Jeff is just what this nation needs, and you're all fat with ham.
That's right.
Just broke quarantine in a very illegal way, and on your ride home back to where the fuck ever you want to hear about mass murdering cult leaders.
That's right.
Also, I'm joking about it, but don't do that. I hope you didn't break quarantine to go see your families. I know the lure is strong, but not much longer, guys.
I know. Hopefully.
Yeah, we can do it. It's okay. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on the virus because it's boring, but just want to be clear that I'm not saying it's okay to break quarantine for Easter. It's not. It's very, very much not okay. Anyway, I also watched Black Christmas last night, the night before Easter, and I just want to recommend that movie. The 1974 version. I need to be very clear because the 2019 version is garbage.
I'll have to watch it.
I can't stop thinking about it. So that's my recommendation for the week. It's, if you like horror movies, obviously, it's a masterpiece. It's so weird and good.
So you can find us places.
You can find us places. You can be our 670th follower on Instagram, at They Will Kill, Facebook at They Will Kill, and Twitter at They Will Kill. Our website is theywillkill.com, and you can email us, which people have started to do, and we love it.
Yes, we love it.
It makes us so happy. Honest to God, guys, like, anybody who's put anything out into the world knows that it feels so good when people tell you that
don't
they
know.
love it. Yeah. Our mom thinks it's great, but when random total strangers, so thank you, total strangers who have been emailing us and messaging us. It really, really, really means the world. So you can do that. Send us compliments at...
or not. Just say hey.
Yeah, or criticism. Yeah. It's fine. They will kill podcast at gmail.com. Oh, hey, hi to our Texas Coven of Marines. Just want to give them a shout out.
Yep. We haven't heard back yet.
No,
we just released the episode, so we'll have to confirm. We'll let you know.
It's not been confirmed or denied.
Nope. Rate, review, subscribe, Apple Podcasts. People have been asking, is that the only place? And no, you can, we will take reviews.
Absolutely.
And subscriptions from wherever you listen.
Yep. But if I'm going to get some free HelloFreshes, it's going to need to happen on Apple Podcasts. So that's why we're pushing that so hard.
But really what we want is for you to just keep listening. That's what we're here for.
Yep.
Thanks to AJ for our music.
Thank you so much. And remember...
I had one earlier and I forget.
I know, I feel like I had one earlier too. It's something nice to share.
Don't.
Oh, I have something. My friend Zoe and I stayed at an Airbnb in Portland a couple years ago, and on the wall, my friend actually took a picture of a marquee that also had this, but on the wall above the bed in vinyl it said, hold on one second. It said, when the world says give up, hope whispers, try it one more time.
So creepy.
It's so creepy. It's so much words above the bed. It's also like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weak. But anyway, hope.
Don't give up, guys.
Try it one more time. Or maybe try something else. So there you go.
All right.
That's all we got.
Yep. We love you so much. Thanks for listening.
We will probably see you this weekend with a hot batch of murder.
Yep. Keep an ear out.
Keep an ear out. Love you. Goodbye. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.